I am going to talk about James Paul Gee's book, Situated Language and Learning, A Critique of Traditional Schooling. I chose this particular book because it takes a very interesting perspective on the learning that goes on during video games as a practice of literacy. Starting from a formal analysis of literacy practices within schools, Gee explores how and why video games can facilitate deep and meaningful learning that should inform curricular and structural changes within schools. Schools can learn a lot from video games. Taking my cue from Gee, I'm going to give my review while playing Final Fantasy XIII, which I have already logged 28 hours on, talk about extended engagement with learning. Gee has a background in linguistics, and following along with his outlook on education, has written in a way that is incredibly accessible, readable, concise, and thrilling. He asserts that learning is ultimately a pleasurable activity, something that schools sometimes forget, but video games embrace, and knows how to write in a way that is definitely fun to read. He presents deep learning as a cultural process, as opposed to an instructed process. What does this mean? This means that we learn better through experience than we do by being told and simply restating parcels of knowledge. We learn best by doing. For students learning to read, this means that the most meaningful learning for them is going to come from the experiences that feed their identities and the practices that they engage in. A lot of these practices, playing video games for example, are not recognized as academic learning opportunities within the classroom. Here, Gee notes that the problem is that these practices often do not pay off in school, though of course we could imagine school changing in such a way that they did, and indeed they should. What traditional schooling recognizes as scholarly or academic is very narrow, and does not allow space for the digital literacies, as apparent in video games, to be validated. This can put the identity of the student as a learner at risk. Children will not identify with, they will even disidentify with, teachers and schools that they perceive as hostile, alien, or oppressive to their home-based identities. What Gee is getting to is how learning needs to be meaningful and relevant to the learner, not at odds with them. This doesn't just apply to video games, but reaches into the depths of cultural literacy practices that are not valued in schools. And the fact of the matter is, we have a lot to learn from video games. They are rich in experiential learning, simulated and projected identities, extended engagement with content, and maintain very specialized languages. Think about a kid playing Halo, which is an incredibly complex game. They might play Halo for 60+ hours. That's a lot of learning, because with video games, when the learning stops, the fun stops. The point of the game is to be challenged and to figure out what to do. It's about coming up with strategies and testing and retesting those strategies. We learned that all skills and skill sets are always ultimately strategies when they are concretely instantiated in practice. Gee played a lot of games to inform his writing in this book. He specifically references several different types of games and roots his methodology within gameplay and not from an outsider perspective. The reader learns about these video games along with Gee. There's no need to be a gamer to get this book. He connects the learning in video games to discourses that can benefit learning within the classroom and essentially learning how to learn effectively. Good video games have a great deal to teach us about how to facilitate learning, even in domains outside games, even in school. To this effect, Gee extends the learning within video games beyond the game and into the forums and groups that many gamers frequent. He calls these affinity spaces, where people of different ages, races, and genders, and expertise levels come together and find the support, information, and knowledge they are looking for. Affinity spaces provide distributed knowledge, offering opportunities for intensive knowledge for any individual. This contrasts quite starkly with the traditional classroom, where classrooms tend to narrowly constrain where students can gain knowledge, rather than utilize widely dispersed knowledge. Gee is critical of traditional schooling, as is evident from the title. He tracks the social, cultural, and economic trends that are changing the ways we live our lives, the jobs we lead, and the tasks that are demanded, and how many schools are just not keeping up. Students are finding more meaningful learning opportunities outside of school, and the skills that are becoming more relevant after schooling is finished are not the skills learned in the classroom. To conclude with Gee's words, modern high-tech society, thanks to its media, technology, and creative capitalists, gets better and better at creating powerful cultural learning processes. Schools do not.